This is the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. On this episode, Mike Reilly and Mike Ferrante host two guests on the podcast from the 21 Mike team. New to the 21 Mike team, real estate agents Chris Buck and Ryan Hemeyer talk about their background and how they got into real estate. They also give insights on their approach if they were to be dealing with some of the outside investors the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast usually likes to talk about. We also talk about the current state of the Cleveland market, the transitions we went through from being a buyer's market to a seller's market, and more. Stay tuned. But first, a word from our sponsor.
Hi, this is Mike Ferrante with Century 21 Homestar and the 21 Mike team. And let's be honest, sometimes selling a house can be a real hassle. If you're in the Heights area, you have to worry about those pesky point of sale violations. You have to do other preparations to get your house ready for showings. And what about staging? That's why we work with Reilly Painting and Contracting to help sellers get top dollar for their house. So give us a call at 216-373-7727 or email info@21mike.com. The 21 Mike team, your one-stop shop for buying and selling.
Hi, everybody. This is Mike Reilly on a beautiful, absolutely beautiful Saturday in Cleveland. It's about 75, no humidity, crystal clear skies. Supposed to be in the low 60s tonight, so great sleeping weather. And the forecast next week is going to be pretty much the same. So this is when we're getting into our golden time of summer. I've got a real interesting podcast today. We've got a couple of new young bucks in the real estate industry to work with my guy, Mike Ferrante. Mike, you want to introduce the audience to your crew?
Yeah, of course. So thanks for having us, Mike. Again, Mike Ferrante with Century 21 Homestar, and I run a team called the 21 Mike team. And it's interesting that you should use the term young bucks because the newest agent on the team is Chris Buck. Chris, why don't you tell everybody how long you've been licensed and maybe just a quick snippet of your story, because I think it's kind of interesting what you did to jump with both feet into real estate.
Yeah. Thanks for bringing up the Buck thing. If you didn't say anything about that, I was going to. Yeah, I got my license in March. So I have a history in sales. I did beverage sales for 16 years and also a theater background. So I went to the University of Akron and found a professor there that had his own theater company in Akron. And he asked me to join. And I worked with them for probably 17 years. So history of sales, history of theater. And when the pandemic hit last year, I was laid off. And in that time, I'd already been thinking about making a career move, I thought, and been thinking about real estate for some time at that point. So I decided what better time to jump in than while I have, it ended up being 3 months off. So I dived into classes and ended up getting the job back and working through the rest of my education. Finally taking my test and passing it and getting my license March 3rd. And then kind of like trying to get my toes wet and decide how I want to do this, how I want to navigate making this my full-time career. And I'm kind of the type of person that has to dive into everything full on in order to learn it. So June 4th was my last day in the beverage industry. I quit to go full-time real estate that day. So I'm kind of
gutsy move.
It is. There's probably every other day I'm like, did I make the right choice?
Well, I'm sure Mike will have questions for you on that. The other guy
I'm already furiously writing down questions for Chris. So
yeah,
theater, sales, beverage business. Yeah. We got a wide range of experience. All right, let's
and the other guy,
go ahead,
Ryan Hemeyer,
hey.
also newer on the team, but not entirely new to real estate. So Ryan, give your story real quick.
So I got my license like the last day of 2019. I don't have much of a background in sales at all, other than selling blitz cards for the football team in high school. I was pretty good at that. But then I didn't do anything sales. I went to the University of Akron, got my degree in accounting. I was an auditor for a little bit. Then I did cost accounting for the J.M. Smucker company. And really just sitting in a cubicle was kind of boring for me. So I ended up getting my license. I jumped out of accounting a little early because as soon as I finished my 2 weeks notice, COVID became a real thing. So I freaked out a little bit and went and got another job with a renovation company for a while to try and learn more about houses. And I worked with them, kind of put real estate on the back burner for a little bit until this past fall, started picking it up. And then in the spring, this past May, I went full time because I started getting some good sales coming in. So I'm having a blast though. I love it.
Well, you're both of you guys jumped into the pool with a lot of water in it with this real estate market, right, Mike?
Yeah, I mean, I think it was good timing. And, you know, I think a lot of new people got licensed, Mike. You know, the numbers of real estate agents has risen greatly. And I think that it has been a little bit of a shock for some of these new agents, because if they don't really know what they're doing or they don't have some kind of support around them, I think a lot of them, to continue with your water analogy, I think a lot of them are drowning because it's an unbalanced market right now, like we've been talking about for weeks. And if you're working with buyers, which is how most new agents start out, it can be overwhelming because right now you might be writing up to 14 offers. One of my agents told me they wrote 14 offers for a buyer before they got one accepted. So it's an out of balance market, which is a difficult market for some agents.
Right. The whole balance has changed because it seems like just yesterday it was a buyer's market. And I mean, you had to prostate yourself if you were selling a house. Yeah, I want to get this cleaned, this fixed up, this, and people would say, okay. Mike, I'm thinking of Brooks' sale on Kingston a year or two ago, and he was bending over backwards to make that sale happen. I mean, he still got a little bit. He got a little bit close to what he was asking, but now, I mean, we're getting multiple offers, especially in that neck of the woods, the Royal Heights. So you guys are coming into a world which is, especially in Cleveland real estate, is definitely foreign to Mike and myself. You want to comment, Mike?
Yeah, so you referenced the changing from a buyer's market to a seller's market. I'm sure most of our listeners know what that means, but 2008 to 2012, essentially the buyers were in charge. There was more inventory than there were buyers, and buyers could pretty much dictate terms. Then things slowly shifted, improved, and got to the point where, because there was no building and a variety of other reasons, now there's an inventory shortage. So the scales have turned. It's now a seller's market. No inventory, very little inventory, a third of what we're used to, around 2,000 listings in greater Cleveland as opposed to the 6,000 that we're used to. And now sellers are in charge. We're dictating the terms as sellers, saying no to repairs, demanding a higher price, our pick of offers. It's a complete 180. And you're right, Mike, I've never experienced a market like this.
Chris, you have an interesting range of experiences, sales class, theater, and then you can pour them a drink while you review their buying and selling options, right? Do you want to comment on what's been your experiences?
Yeah, the interesting thing is I'm new, so I don't have any other experience other than the market that it is right here, right now. So it'd be a change for me to see it shift in a different direction. I guess, like I said before, I'm just kind of getting my feet wet.
You're like Charlie Sheen in, I keep thinking about that scene in Wall Street when he is going around pushing this stock and he runs into one of the senior brokers and he says, yeah, you bucks do well in these bull markets, but when it gets a bear market, that's when you're really testing your mettle. How about you, Ryan? What's been your sense?
I mean, so like I said, I kind of put it on the back burner until late last fall and started ramping up. I started getting my first sales really starting to hit in the spring too, but I definitely feel that I didn't do too much before the, extreme sellers market hit. So I do know, getting the sales working for the buyers, you're regularly putting in offers well over asking if it's something that, in the first couple of days, it's going into a multiple offer situation.
All right. Well, let me throw this out to the group here. I mean, what do you do when you're clearly overpaying? I mean, you've got an investor calling in from out of town. And of course, they're used to California prices. And you've got some 3-bedroom house in the ghetto. and they want 60,000. And to your out of state investors, wow, 60,000, I get a 3-bedroom house, man. Let's, and they're clearly maybe even getting into a bidding war. I want to go to you, Chris, first. I mean, what do you do in a situation like that when the buyer is overpaying?
I think the best thing that we can do is be advisors to our clients. So if I'm in a situation where I think my buyer might be overpaying, I don't want to steer them or tell them definitely to do one thing or the other, but I might advise them and say, hey, I understand that you're in California and this might be the perfect situation for you, but you got to look at this market, and that's what I'm here for, to help guide you in the market here, where maybe it's not the best idea to overspend on this particular house. Maybe we could find you a better house where you could return more profits for yourself.
Yeah, but he's saying, well, I can't find any. I'm going to go to you, Mike, real quick. But, I'm sure you're getting hammered by a buyer saying, you know what, I want to buy houses before, they keep going up. So there is a kind of buying frenzy out there where the market's getting artificially inflated. Now you're going to, talk to a client and you're going to say, hey, I think you're overpaying, but they're going to say, hey, kid, what do you know? You're new to the market. I mean, this is when you're kind of leaning on your quarterback here. Mike, comment?
Yeah. So a couple things here. Number one, we are brokers of data. So I think one of the things that we do and my teammates do pretty well is we'll say, look, let me show you some data, and we'll run the numbers and show them what homes are selling for. And also, though, if an investor says, look, I love the numbers on this, and my ROI calculations make sense at 60 or 65,000, we don't typically like twist arms to try to talk them out of it. I think what Chris said is pretty accurate. We talk about the different options, and the other conversation that we have is, Mike, you and I always make comparisons to stocks. So look, yeah, you can buy this penny stock or this tech stock or, and it looks really good and the potential return looks really good. But have you considered buying something that is a little bit less risky? And I like to use the word risk when we talk to people like this, because they understand that concept. Look, you could buy this podunk company that could shoot from, 3 cents a share to $5 a share and you cash in, or you could buy Apple or IBM or something in between. So it's your call, but remember, you're rolling the dice. I mean, if you're okay gambling, then that's what you're doing to some extent. You are rolling the dice with a riskier proposition. And so I like to talk to them about risk. Ryan might have an interesting comment on this now too, because he's been working a little more with investors and he's actually working both sides, buyers, and he's got some of these $60,000 Cleveland properties. So I'm sure he's chomping at the bit to chime in as well.
Go ahead, Ryan, jump in the pool here.
Yeah. So just kind of like Mike was saying, if you have certain investors, and a lot of times they'll have like a cap rate requirement or something that they're looking for. Sometimes they'll be looking for like a 10 or 12% cap rate, but they'll be looking in nicer suburbs, and you got to have a conversation with them like, hey, if we're going in those areas, you got to expect your return's just not going to be as good because everyone's buying those up. It's more competitive for there. So if you want those kind of higher returns, like Mike was saying, that goes directly in tune with the amount of risk. So that's when you're going to go towards the less desirable parts of town that, the properties are selling. The houses are only, oftentimes 50,000, give or take a little bit.
So more risk there, right?
Correct.
It's like buying junk bonds. So we're back in the 80s. Wall Street.
Yeah. And Mike, like we always talk about, these numbers on paper don't always pan out to reality. They say, yeah, but I'm getting 14% on this duplex in this area or that area. Yeah, that's if everything goes perfectly well. They never go perfectly well. Okay. They always go perfectly bad. That's my opinion. Yeah. It's certainly more often than not, we hear the sob stories. And Mike, that's been our theme all along is, we're tired. I think that's how we started this whole thing. We were tired of hearing the sob stories and we said, you know what, we should share some of this wisdom and some of these experiences that we've had so that people aren't walking in blind. Now, I'm sure there's no shortage of investors who are still rolling the dice with these risky investments. And, we're not here to, as real estate salespeople, we're not just trying to make a sale, but if we educate and inform and they say, I don't care, I still want this property in this area, you say, okay, well, at least I prepared you for the challenges that you might face. I hope it goes well for you.
You better have that in writing too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I think one of the things that can get into an ethical dilemma is, you guys get paid on commission. So there is a little ethical quagmire here because you may know this investor's overpaying and said, hey, I've told you, full disclosure, blah, blah, blah. You want the risk? Fine. Hey, here's the house. What's your thoughts, Chris?
My thoughts are, I think you have to look inside yourself. I think you have to look inside yourself to figure out who you are as a person, how you want to be as a real estate agent. I personally, I just want to be able to help the person. So if I'm telling him the risks and giving him the data and he still wants to do it, great. But I didn't get into it. I got into this to be able to make money, enough money to support my family and have a fun, good lifestyle. But I didn't get into it to do it in a shady way. So.
Oh, exactly.
If I don't make that extra couple $100, that's not, it's more important to me to help the person out and help them get what they want.
Okay. Well, I know in some fashion, we're kind of regurgitating stuff that we've talked about earlier, Mike, about getting your team together. So we've got 2 rookies on the team here, or semi-rookie, Ryan, no disrespect, but
you're good.
Here you've got your investor coming in, they're buying a house. What about this whole concept of property manager? Who's going to manage the house? What's your thoughts, Ryan? What do you tell them?
As far as property manager goes, that's a tougher one.
That's okay. We can edit this, Ryan.
I think you gave Ryan a stumper. I don't think we've really talked much management with him. His answer to that is he'd probably call me and ask me what he should do. Right, Ryan?
Help, Mike.
Yeah,
help.
Yeah, pretty much. I guess otherwise,
Ryan, you got to be able to hit the curveball here in the majors. So go ahead.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So, I've worked with a couple different property managers and I would just compare with it. It's one of those things where in general, every tenant is always going to want more support from the property manager. But if the property manager is making about 80% of their clientele happy, they're taking care of business, they're taking the headache off. As long as they're responsive and they're getting done what needs to be done, it seems like it's very between the owner and the tenants, their interests are pretty conflicted there. So somebody's always not happy and somebody is.
Yeah.
If that makes sense.
When you get into what you were saying earlier, they want that 14%, 15% cap rate, and they're buying in a kind of a shady area. Boy, you better have a property manager, and you better make sure that property manager costs are in this cap rate that you're coming up with. Chris, what's your thoughts?
Exactly.
Property management.
I gotta say,
you want to help I'm sorry, I didn't mean to jump on you, but you want to help your client. Well, they better have a property manager, right?
Yeah, I think it depends on the client and the property. Obviously, having a property manager is going to be a little bit more overhead and cut down on their ROI. So but it also cuts down on their risk and personal time that's just as important as money these days. So if you want a property manager and you find a good one that's going to help you manage some properties and leave you more time to go out and invest more, I think that's worth it.
But I think we're kind of dancing around the issue here, which is, are there any good property managers in Cleveland?
Let me jump on that one real quick, Mike. So I'm going to actually tell a story about Ryan real quick. We were at a meeting with a client who has houses and we're currently selling them. And he told us, I'm unhappy with my current property manager. I'm moving to, let's just call him XYZ company. And so Ryan had just visited a couple properties for a different investor, and these tenants had nothing but horrible things to say about this manager. Now, in some cases, you just take that with a grain of salt because in a lot of cases, tenants are just never happy. But in this case, Ryan did the right thing. He said, look, I got to tell you, I just visited two properties and these people were not real happy. And, he gave this owner this assessment and the guy moved on anyway. He said, yeah, whatever. I'm going to move forward with them anyway. So to get back to your question though, Mike, property management in Cleveland is kind of a barren wasteland. There just aren't a lot of property managers where I would stick my neck out and say, yeah, go with them. And that's why, I know you're leading up to talking about working with Reilly Properties and
no, because we're
in part.
No, I'm not going there. Believe me, we're very selective of how many new clients we take on. But go ahead, Mike.
Well, and that's the point too. What Chris said earlier about it depends on the location of the property and that kind of thing. So, when we talk about what you do, I think it's always interesting that you stick to your guns. Someone comes to you with a property in a location you don't manage, you say no. I think the mistake that a lot of property managers make is they take anything. And if they're not, even if they're not qualified to do so, it's like realtors who say, oh yeah, I can work in Akron, but they're from Cleveland or vice versa. A lot of these managers will just take on properties to add to their portfolio, to add to their gross income without regard to whether or not they're truly qualified to manage the type of property or the location of the property. And that's, and I'm tooting your horn here, so take it, let me toot. You are very good about sticking to the areas that the best, and you are good at managing those types of properties. And we're talking Heights area in particular. And that's why when someone asks me, and if it's in the Heights area, I say, well, you should definitely talk to Mike Reilly, and take that for what you will.
Yeah. Well, I would think, Chris and Ryan, if you're working with investors, you have to have a property manager, right, Chris?
I'll be honest. I haven't had a client that has invested with me yet. So okay. I feel like most of my opinion here is just that opinion and speculation.
Theoretical, right? I get it.
I would say absolutely.
Ryan, go ahead, Ryan.
Because the whole idea for these investors getting rentals is for passive income. If you're having to manage all these, there's a lot of work involved. It's not passive at that point. So it's an expense that you have to figure in. Otherwise, the whole thing's not worth it in the first place. And then on top of which, there's a lot of out-of-state investors that are coming too. And there's absolutely no way that they can manage it themselves if they're not even local to the area.
And Ryan, what did Jay say? We'll call him Jay. Jay said to us, he said, if I were here, it would be different. And I think, Mike, that's a title for another podcast. If I were there, it would be different, because that was exactly his feeling, was that because he was so far away and he felt like he didn't have competent management in place, he felt out of control, helpless. He was drowning.
Yeah. And I think we had Ryan, we had a title, one of our podcasts called "Everybody's Making Money But Me." And that's a common refrain we hear from investors. And you know what? When you go down investor road, you're working with investors, they want to buy more houses. They're not just buying one house from you. They want to buy, theoretically, they should say, you know what, this is my first investment of many. I'm looking to maybe get a half a dozen homes in there. And if they don't have a property management accountants, like we talk about, Mike, the team in place, they're going to buy one property, and within a month or so, it's going to be a nightmare for them. So end of buying 5 more, now they're calling you or they're desperate just to get out of it. So I would say to the group here, that if you're going to work with investors, you have to have a vetted property manager who can handle it. I'm going to kick it back to you, Ryan, for comment.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. If you're having a property manager that's just kind of dropping the ball, so to speak, it can slow up the process with, whether you're offloading or you're trying to get more properties. It's very time consuming. So 100% I agree. It defeats the purpose if it's not making your life easier.
Right. And let me just kind of spin real quickly back to you, Chris, because one of the main lessons in being a good sales person is it's got to be a win for everybody. It's got to be a win for you. It's got to be a win for the person you're selling. You're not selling them a junk car, just like you're not selling them a bad property, a bad investment. So being able to ask the questions of your potential client and say, now, what do you want? Do you want to be called at 4 a.m. when property manager, suddenly is not showing up? Or, elaborate, Chris. When you're talking to people, you're trying to find out, all right, what exactly do you want? Do you know what you want? That's a common question. Go ahead, Chris.
Yeah, first, let me say thank you for giving me some work to do, because I think I'm realizing the importance of having someone that I can call and say, hey, if a client reaches out to me and wants to invest, and then I can say, hey, I have this guy. He's a good property manager down here in Akron. I have this guy. He manages some properties. So I need to do my research there. But yeah, sales is ideally you want the win-win for everybody, but that's not always the case. So to me, sales is about relationships. And Mike has said and taught us already that what we do in real estate is we talk to people. So when we're talking to people, we find out what they want. Like you're leading me on to talk about here, is you got to find out what they want and what they're looking for. And when you can do that, you can determine how best to help them and how best to build a relationship so that they can be repeat business. Because ideally, what do we want as a real estate agent? Repeat business. It helps us out. It helps investors out.
Yeah. And, the reality, and Ryan, I'd be interested in your take on this, because we've been in it a little bit longer than Chris. The reality is they don't know what they want. So when you ask them a question like, okay, well, what do you want? That's the blind leading the blind type question. I think sorting out and dealing with investors who clearly understand what the game is going to save you a lot of time, and it's going to save you a lot of headache. Just eliminate the people that are just wasting your time looking for investment opportunities. What's your thoughts, Ryan?
I think, going back to where you're talking about an everybody wins scenario, that reminds me of a deal I did last spring. I had a guy who, he had a house that was like, he was living there occupied, he had got it from his grandmother, but it was kind of, it's in an investment area too, but nicer end for an investment kind of area. So he just, the place wasn't in great condition. So it was a good opportunity for a flipper or a renter to come through and get a deal on it. So I was talking to him, trying to figure out, hey, you could fix this up yourself, sell it on the open market for a higher price, or, this looks like a huge headache too. I could tell he didn't want to do it. So we can offload it for you a little cheaper. This way some investor's going to get it. They got to win because it's got to be, there's got to be an ROI for them. But if you want to have it quick and easy, that's what you got to do. So do you want it easy, or do you want max price? If that makes sense.
Right. Well, you got to be the go-to person, because you're like they're coming to you for one simple reason. They want to make money. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
They want to make money on their real estate purchase, and they don't want to go through a lot of stress. So the best thing you can kind of do, they're trying to make money. So when you're finding them properties, you just want to find valid comps to compare to make sure, you're comparing details, the asking price, the condition of the property, what things are
other things and their conditions are selling for nearby, and are they vacant? Do they have tenants in place? Are they long-term tenants? Do they keep up with their payments? How much do they pay? And like, who's paying utilities and all the other expenses involved? And you kind of get all those details together, and you just put everything on the table for them so they can make the most educated decision they can. Because at the end of the day, they're making the decision. You just got to bring them all the support that you can.
Right, exactly. You've got all these different types of buyers coming in. And Mike, I know you're probably chomping at the bit too here, but you've got all these different buyers coming in. And, we're spending most of the time on investors, but you've got young people looking to buy. And you have older people looking to downsize. And so each one of these buyers has a different set of needs here. So when you're dealing with the investor, property manager has got to be flowing throughout the conversation. If you're dealing with a young couple, sweat equity now. We're returning back to the days of the sweat equity. Well, like, hey, how about buying this house and just be prepared over the next 2 years, to fix it up. And here's what your estimated costs are. Go ahead, Mike, jump in.
Yeah, I know we had a podcast where we talked about the grannyized property. That's a great opportunity for someone to buy and add some sweat equity, solid bones, but still has the pink tile bathroom and yellow countertops in the kitchen. But, going back to some of your earlier points, Mike, I always tell our teammates, and both these guys on the call today are younger guys, very, relatively new in the business, especially Chris. But I always tell them, look, we need to be Google for our clients. In other words, when they need something, we want them to think of us as the resource. I don't want our clients going on Google and searching for property manager or searching.
Mike, hold on.
plumber.
I'm going to send out invites because we're about to end. All right.
Okay.
We're going to do part 2 in just like 15 more minutes. Okay. So I'll send invites again. All right.
Okay.
Thank you for listening to the Cleveland Real Estate Investor Podcast. You can find all our episodes at www.reilly-properties.com, or you can find us on your favorite streaming services like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Overcast, YouTube, SoundCloud, and more. If you have any questions or topics you want us to discuss, you can email us at theclevelandrealestateinvestor@gmail.com.